All right, let's just dive right into this explainer and break down a recipe. If you're a fan of rich, deeply flavorful Indian cuisine, you've definitely come across the legendary dish known as Bhuna Gosht. But today, we're doing something a little bit special. We're looking at this classic through the lens of a highly acclaimed masterclass. We're going to deconstruct his exact method step by step. So get comfortable and let's unravel the anatomy of a true culinary classic together. Brar's core thesis right out of the gate is a massive relief. You simply have to cook mutton with spices, and that's kind of it. No overnight marination to stress over. You literally just need one single pressure cooker for the entire journey. This is the most basic, everyday dish cooked in places like Delhi and Lucknow. It completely strips away that intimidating restaurant facade. You don't need a commercial kitchen. You really just need to understand the technique. Okay, let's get into phase 1, building the onion base. The magic number here? 5. You're going to need 5 whole onions for every 1 kilogram of mutton. Now, I know when you slice them up, it's going to look like an absolute mountain of onions. But as the chef notes, don't panic. It reduces drastically as it cooks. You'll want to start by heating a generous amount of clarified butter, oil, or a mix of both. Throw in some cloves, let them splutter, add your green chilies, and then get ready for the absolute most important step in handling these 5 onions. This right here is where technique comes into play. You do not just dump all those onions in at once to roast. No way. You only add half of them to the pan initially, cooking them on a high flame until they're about 50% done, just turning a nice light brown. Why? Because you are intentionally holding the rest of those raw onions back. When the meat goes in later, those raw onions are going to sweat with the meat. This dual onion approach is the absolute secret to enhancing all those deep flavors, making sure you have both a caramelized base and a sweet, moisture-releasing sweat happening at the exact same time. Moving right along to step 2, sweating the meat. So after about 7 minutes of roasting that first batch of onions, in goes the meat, followed immediately by those remaining raw onions and some roughly chopped coriander stems. Then you're going to rapidly add your 3 foundational spices: turmeric powder, red degi chili powder, and coriander powder. And that is literally it for the main spices. You'll just keep cooking this low and slow. The visual cue you're looking for is when the turmeric is completely cooked through and that beautiful, unmistakable aroma of cooked coriander hits your nose. Now pay attention to the timing here, because it absolutely matters based on what kind of ginger and garlic you're using. If you take the traditional route and use roughly chopped ginger and garlic, you got to add that right at the very beginning of the cooking process. But if you're using ginger garlic paste, which cooks super rapidly, you have to wait. You add the paste towards the end of this sweating phase, right as the meat really begins to release its fats. It's a tiny detail, but it prevents your aromatics from burning and turning incredibly bitter. We check our salts, add half a cup of water, some crushed black pepper, and lock that lid, which brings us to step 3, the 80% rule. 80%. Honestly, this number is everything. When you pressure cook this mixture, the mutton should only be 80% cooked. For Chef Bar's particular cooker, that's exactly 6 whistles. If your meat is particularly tough, maybe it's 8 or 9, but the core concept remains totally unchanged. The meat absolutely must not fall off the bone yet. It needs to retain its structure because, well, it has a lot more cooking to do in the final phase. Quick detour before we hit the final stage, a really cool piece of culinary trivia. You might be sitting there wondering, hey, where are the tomatoes? Well, if you were making a Punjabi-style Bhuna Gosht, you would absolutely add tomato puree or chopped tomatoes, along with some chopped capsicum right near the end. But the classic style, the traditional Lucknow and Delhi approach we're deconstructing today, consists purely of mutton pieces and a thoroughly cooked, rich onion gravy. No tomatoes allowed. All right, on to phase 4, the secret masala finish. Black cardamom, cumin seeds, and a couple of cloves. That is it. You simply take these 3 super common ingredients and grind them up very finely. Adding this powder at the final stage gives the dish its ultimate elevated color and a massive kick of finishing flavor that separates just a good curry from a phenomenal Bhuna Gosht. Now for the actual execution. Do you need to transfer all of this to a fancy wide-bottomed pan or a traditional lagan for aesthetics? Absolutely not. Skip the tedious transfer. You just keep the flame going and reduce the gravy right there in the pressure cooker. As it reduces, the flavors of the onions and the subtle curd essence blend seamlessly together, naturally thickening the sauce while bringing that 80% cooked meat safely up to 100. While it's reducing, you fold in some chopped mint leaves and, for a true Lucknow touch, a splash of optional kavra water. Don't worry, the kavra will cook thoroughly, leaving behind a really subtle, beautiful essence rather than an overpowering perfume. And you know what's brilliant? How totally adaptable this entire framework is? If you're more of a poultry person and prefer chicken over mutton, you can use this exact same process. The only change? When you make that 3-ingredient secret masala, just swap out the bold black cardamom for the lighter, more floral green cardamom. The technique of sweating the onions in that one-pot reduction remains completely identical. Which brings us right back to where we started. Is it a complicated recipe? I mean, after seeing how 5 onions, a few basic household spices, and a disciplined, simple pressure cooker technique yield beautifully tender meat falling right off the bone, it really isn't, is it? We've stripped away the whole restaurant myth to reveal a deeply logical, highly accessible dish. So my final question to you is, now that you actually know the anatomy of this classic, what's stopping you from mastering Bhuna Gosht in your own kitchen tonight?